of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Note for the record that all council members are present.
Okay, good. Anyone want to add anything to the agenda before we adopt it?
Move adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We have an agenda. And the first item on the agenda is a presentation about HIP housing from Kate Comfort Haar, the Executive Director. Please.
Okay, I have to say that is the fastest I've ever gotten up to speak, so thank you for that. My name is Kate Comfort Haar. I'm Executive Director of HIP Housing. HIP Housing specializes in affordable housing solutions throughout San Mateo County, and we've been doing it since 1972. You may remember that we came a little earlier in the year to deliver a bunch of calendars, and those were delivered actually by one of our staff members who is the head of our self-sufficiency program who also lives here in Brisbane. So tonight, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the crisis in affordable housing in this county, talk about how HIP housing programs actually respond to that crisis, and also give a little bit of a history of the between and relationship between HIP housing and the city of Brisbane. So housing. We are truly in the middle of an unprecedented crisis in affordable housing in San Mateo County. This is the second most expensive place to live in the country, second to New York and tied with San Francisco. 1 in 5 families can't currently afford their housing situation, and nearly 1,800 people sleep homeless every night. 211 takes more calls for housing-related referrals than for any other service. About 32% of their calls are for housing services. The next closest is food at 17%, so nearly double for housing. The San Mateo County Section 8 waiting list is closed, and the wait list at shelters can be as long as 6 months long and very complicated to get into. There's been an increase in demand for rental housing as a result of the foreclosure crisis.
Could you explain the Section 8 wait list? So what is that?
Sure. The Section 8 wait list is a subsidized list for people of low income and very low income. It's managed by the county, the housing authority. So you get on the list, and then that makes you eligible for properties that are below market rate in the county. So typically those are properties that are owned and operated by programs like ours.
But that's federal money, right?
It is federal HUD money, yes.
See?
Yes. So there's been an increase in the demand for rental housing as a result of the foreclosure crisis. People think, oh, with foreclosure, it's going to be easier. It's actually not easier, because the folks who had homes who are now not in their homes are looking for rental housing, while those who rented houses that were foreclosed on are also now looking for rental housing. As a result, we've seen an incredible spike in the cost of rental housing in this county, such that the new county indicator that just came out from the county says that a one-bedroom apartment is $1,926 a month. It's a 12% increase since June, and from June to December. So couple that with the fact that we have the lowest rental housing production in decades, and we have a recipe for disaster. You can see on this slide that we actually have come up just a little bit in the amount of housing, but that is projected to go absolutely flat as a result of this. So there's been some tremendous funding cuts in recent years. The demise of the redevelopment agencies has had a huge impact on housing, because those agencies really help to provide affordable housing. As we know, it's not a profit endeavor to do affordable housing. It doesn't happen without some sort of subsidy. And without redevelopment agencies, the funds that were there to create new affordable housing are now gone for the most part. We've seen over $1 billion in cuts statewide as a result of the redevelopment agencies leaving. We've also seen cuts to our CDBG funding that also help to support housing projects, so about 51% in cuts since 2009. So we're starting to get the picture here of a real perfect storm.
Would you explain that acronym?
The CDBG is a Community Development Block Grant. Many cities have access to those. They use those to fund social service programs and housing programs as well. There's a home side and a social service side. And then, of course, there's sequestration. So with the events of recent weeks. An additional 8.2% in cuts are coming to CDBG, to HUD funds, to programs like the HIP housing programs that provide housing. That can translate actually to quite a bit more. We just got notice from the county that we'll be receiving a 20% cut in our funding for next year.
Why? Why's that?
I don't exactly know, but it's definitely happening. So we're seeing an exponential increase in the amount of caution, I think, that cities and counties are using when it comes to housing, when they're using funds that are coming from the federal government. And then the final thing is this Palmer decision. So it used to be that cities and counties had this tool called inclusionary housing, meaning that if somebody was building a big development in their community, you could require a certain amount of units to be affordable. Well, in 2009, the Palmer decision came down challenging that idea. So it's still in the courts, it's undecided, but as a result, most cities and the county are now really backing off of doing an inclusionary housing.
Is that at the Supreme Court or where?
State, California State.
Yeah, but I mean, at what level? Has it been through appeals court?
You know, I'm not exactly sure where it stands. It's been through appeals, but I think it might be at the Supreme Court. It hasn't been heard in about a year, and I don't know when it's scheduled to be heard again. Okay. So it's really just in limbo. It's in hold. So there's also a misconception about job growth in this county. Yes, there is going to be job growth. In fact, there's going to be tremendous job growth, but it's not necessarily for high-tech, high-paying jobs, as one might assume. Most of the jobs that are going to be coming online are going to be for those making $50,000 or less. We're talking about teachers, home health aides, bank tellers, EMTs, service personnel. In order to afford a one-bedroom apartment at $1,926 a month, you need to make about $82,000 a year. So you can see by this scale, the blue line represents San Mateo County. Most teachers make under $70,000. EMTs, bank tellers, retail, waitresses and waiters make far less. So where are they going to live? Well, this is the challenge. Right now, we have about 170,000 people who are commuting into this county in order to work every day. Now, if you're a minimum wage earner, that means that you're probably spending about 70% of your income on transportation and on housing. Of course, that creates all kinds of challenges. There's quality of life issues for the individual, and then there's traffic issues for those of us already in the county. In addition, when you start to have those kind of workforce housing shortages and that kind of demand on an individual's life, it's not sustainable. So eventually what we're going to see is some workforce shortages to couple with the housing shortages that we've seen. Who's hardest hit? Of course, low-income families, seniors, those with disabilities. So as a result, we have to use what we have more efficiently. And that's where our programs come in. So HIP Housing has 3 programs. All of them use existing housing stock to create new affordable housing: our home sharing program, our self-sufficiency program, and property development. Since 1972, we've worked with over 64,000 people. We've helped to house over 17,000. Each year, we place about 1,400 people annually in affordable housing solutions. 700 are through our home sharing program, about 450 in the properties that we own, and another 250 through our self-sufficiency program. Additionally, we take about 3,000 calls every year for referrals and case management. And each one of those calls...
Your area is...
San Mateo County.
San Mateo County.
Just the county.
Okay.
Kind of county experts.
Okay.
So what is home sharing? Home sharing is when we match those who have space in their home with those who need an affordable place to live. For a home provider, it reduces cost and it helps them to stay independent. For a seeker, it helps them find an affordable place to live. We do extensive interviews, we do screenings, we do criminal background checks, we do income verifications, and then once a match is determined, we do what's called a home sharing agreement so that everybody understands the expectations of that relationship. And if it were to end, there's also a section in that agreement about how it ends in a mutually understandable way that everybody agrees to. We can also do rent and service exchanges, meaning someone who may not have the ability to pay at all, but perhaps you're a senior or someone with disabilities and you need someone who can do work around your house, that can do marketing, those kinds of things. We can set up those arrangements as well.
If I may, Mayor, do you ever do workshops in communities with the home sharing?
We do an extensive amount of outreach. We do a lot of presentations. We're out pretty much all year round at service organizations, senior centers, faith-based organizations, community fairs, foreclosure fairs. We work quite a bit with the community.
And so when you do these presentations, what kind of response do you get? You know, like if you went to a senior's you know, luncheon. And a lot of these folks, I mean, they live in their homes still.
Right.
But, you know, they could use extra money and they might be by themselves too, and where they could use someone to help them with certain things around the house. Do you get a lot of feedback that yes, you've made connections based upon these presentations that you've done?
I mean, yeah, we house about 700 people through our home sharing program. So, and that's an ongoing, we add about 300 matches a year. So we get very good response, but of course the demand continues to grow. So right now we've seen 11% demand. Do we get good response? Yes. Can we keep up with the demand? Not necessarily. Does that make sense?
Yeah. All right, thanks.
So we have one of the largest home sharing programs in the county. We are the only one in San Mateo County. We serve about 1,900 people a year, making 300 new matches a year. The average rent is below $700. So when you compare 1,926 to 700, all of a sudden you have something that's affordable. We do professional long-term case management, meaning that our case managers, and we have 5, are there for that match all the way along. We call, especially if it's a senior home provider, we do regular calls and check in to make sure that that match is going well. And we also provide any kind of conflict resolution that might need to come up and other things. It just, people are complicated, so it comes up. We are supported by private foundations and donors. We have a good relationship with the county housing department. 16 of the 20 cities in this county also support our program, and we're really reaching out to try and get all 20 cities engaged in this program. Because what happens is you might have a provider in Belmont who matches with someone in San Carlos. You might have a seeker who lives in Brisbane who matches with someone in Brisbane, but they might match with someone in South San Francisco as well. What we find is that it's a very interconnected, very interdependent program, and all the cities benefit from having the program because it does reduce homelessness dramatically. So a typical home provider would be a senior or someone with disabilities. They might match with someone who has 2 jobs, for example. These are actual case studies of real matches. Person has 2 jobs, they're a non-profit employee and maybe an administrative assistant, and they make about $42,000 a year. So $600 for them represents 17% of their monthly income, which is a manageable amount. Then they can still afford food and medicine and the other things. When you start getting up over 30%, that's when you start to get into trouble. So it's good for everyone, this home sharing program. It prevents homelessness and promotes independence, especially of seniors and those with disabilities. It maximizes existing housing stock, taking what's already there and creating new affordable housing. It reduces the demand on land development, and it's much more timely and cost efficient than trying to build new, right, because it already is right there and we can place someone right away. It helps people from all walks of life. It builds community. It helps seniors to age in place, and right now, it is pretty much the only game in town. There really is not much affordable housing available right now. There's one property that's opening with, I think it has 60 units, and they're anticipating about 2,500 applicants for that property. And that's the only one that's set to come online in the next year that I even know of. Every shelter, every nonprofit agency, and every city and municipality in this county refers to HIP housing because it's pretty much the only game in town if you really need housing. Our self-sufficiency program is a welfare to work program, one of the top 7 in the state. It's for families who have minor children in the house who are committed to completing educational and job goals. It promotes financial independence, and the goal is to really break their cycle of poverty. We provide those who are qualified for the program with housing scholarships, long-term case management, life skills workshops, and housing placement opportunities. This is not a program for the weak. You have to work really hard. You have to come up with a savings plan. You have to have a work plan for your educational process. You have to meet with your counselor once a month, and you have to attend these workshops. And those workshops can be everything from resume building to how to manage children. Most of our clients in this program are single parents and can use help with the parenting and the stresses of being a single parent. So there's a lot of resources through this program. We have a 1-year, a 2-year, and a 5-year program. That 5-year program, we've seen people come from referrals from a shelter all the way to owning a home through Habitat for Humanity, and we help them all the way through that process. Last year we had 4 that came through the program to home ownership. So 100% of the graduates of this program report that they have a better housing situation. The average increase in income is about 81%. The average increase in savings is about $1,300. And mind you, most of these people came in with no savings. So to create a $1,300 savings when you came from nothing is huge for them. 90% improved money management skills, and 100% report better hope for the future. And all three of those ladies there now own homes of their own, and two of them have their own businesses, and one of them is a registered nurse now. So our final program is our property development. We own 14 properties throughout the county. These are all BMR properties. We go in with the city, with the county, with other funders, buy these properties, rehab them, manage them, maintain them, and rent them at below market rates. We house about 240 people in these, and our most recent acquisition in Menlo Park is the first piece of affordable rental housing to go into Menlo Park in 25 years. So we're pretty proud of that. So the other thing that we're really proud of is that HIP housing is actually part of the housing element for the city of Brisbane. Our home sharing program has been cited as one of the tools that you can use to help you meet your housing goals, and it also states that there's a policy and program in place for continued support of this program. In terms of what we do in the city of Brisbane, countywide, we talked about this a little bit earlier, we meet with senior centers, church groups, we go to fairs, expos, the Veterans Center, and service organizations throughout the county. Recently, in August, we met with, we met at the senior club here in Brisbane, and we're now working with Russ Carmick to do a little bit more outreach. He's actually helping us get some information out to the schools, creating language for posts on your 2 community boards, and we're also doing a business card size ad in the March Park and Rec Guide, and we're continuing to distribute home flyers to the senior center. Every month we distribute a flyer of all the rooms available through our home sharing program, so we're going to be sending that to the senior club on a regular basis now. So in terms of our relationship with the city of Brisbane, we started a funding partnership in 2007, and you funded us through 11-12. That was at a $5,000 level, and in 2011-12, last year, we assisted about 17 people who were either living or working in the city of Brisbane. This year, we're halfway through our year. We've already served 19 people, so we're expecting to double that 17 number from last year. That's just indicative of what's happening throughout the county. We'd really like to encourage you to consider funding us again for 13-14. We plan to do a lot of work not only in this community but countywide to make sure that everybody has access to housing that they can afford. So as I finish up, I just again would like to encourage you to consider our proposal for 13-14. But if you take nothing else away from this presentation, we right now have a 6-to-1 ratio for our home sharing program, meaning for every 1 provider, we have 6 people seeking. If you know a senior in your area, if you know a newly single parent who doesn't really want to bring someone into their home without it being a safe, controlled experience, someone who travels a lot, a pilot, someone of that nature who could use someone in their home to keep it safe and make sure someone's, is not there alone, please let them know about HIP housing and send them our way, because we are very, very anxious to meet all the home providers in this county. Any questions?
Yeah.
Questions?
I have a question. How do you acquire apartment buildings, being much of a nonprofit organization?
It's a little bitty baby miracle when it happens, because it is really, really hard. In Menlo Park, the city has a BMR fund, which is an in lieu fee fund that they have on other developments.
BMR?
It's a below market rate fund.
Okay.
It's a dedicated fund for affordable housing because they have what's called an in lieu fee fund. So that was from back in those inclusionary housing days when they could require developers to do that. They had some money sitting that they needed to use for affordable housing. We knew of a property that was vacant, which is a great scenario because that means you don't have to relocate people. So we went to the city, said, are you interested? They said yes. We went to the county. We said, are you interested? Do you have some home funds? They said yes. We went to the city of Redwood City, a partner city right next door, and said, you've got some home funds and some CHOTO funds, which is something HIP housing is. Would you be willing to put them in on this project if we could make an ADA unit and get some veterans from the VA in there? And they said yes, they'd be interested. So now we're starting to build collaborations and finding funding sources. I then went to Facebook, that was right down the street, and said, would you be willing to come in with some funding? I went to Rebuilding Together to say, can you help us with one piece of this property? If we can get some funding and some sponsors, will you help us build a community room and do some landscaping, which we wouldn't otherwise be able to afford? And they said yes. And then we started partnering with other nonprofits to get some solar panels that were on the building up and running. But at any point along the way, if one of the partners falls out, the whole deal falls apart. So it's months and months of working, trying to find the right partners, trying to find the collaborations, trying to make it happen. In the past, there were RDA funds, and there was resources from those RDA funds. But without those, it's a whole new ballgame. Very creative process now.
So that was the unintended consequence from the governor and the state legislature. To pull,
It wasn't
they thought it was
unintended.
going to really fix things, and it really kind of messed things up.
Well, it messed it up for affordable housing. It's just not a profit endeavor. No one's going to step in and do it. And in this kind of perfect storm environment where you've got a lot of people seeking housing who don't make enough to afford what we have here, not every community is experiencing it the way we are because our rents are so high.
Thank you.
Yeah, I did say. Thank you, Ray. So, Kate, so you mentioned that you've been in correspondence with Russ and working with the seniors. Are there other things that we could do as a city to strengthen that relationship with you in HIP housing?
One of the best things, right, because let's say a senior. Seniors aren't necessarily going to seek out bringing someone into their home. They're cautious, they're careful, and they're a little bit frightened, right? They need to have the confidence of knowing that it's a reputable organization. So one of the ways that confidence is built is by having a partnership with the city that they live in. If you support it, then they know that it must be a good program. So that's one thing. Having flyers and brochures in your lobby, which I think you guys already do, because most cities do. Like I said, we're pretty much the only game in town, so most cities do keep our flyers around in your community centers, in your city hall. That's very helpful because that also lends both credibility, but also there's a lot of people that come through your doors, so that helps a lot. And then just helping us stay aware of any activities that you might be involved in where you think we could make a plea for home providers, get out there and talking to people. We're always welcome to that. And I encourage you to come to some of our events and to learn more about us if you don't know about us. We do have an annual luncheon coming up in May, and we'd love to have you come and hear a little bit more, talk to some of our clients, see some of the folks who have actually benefited from this program.
Now, do you have any examples of the home sharing in Brisbane?
I should have brought some. I don't, but we do have five matches right now, and I didn't bring a bio for them, but I can get one for you. I'm sorry. I should have brought that.
Yeah, because people don't want to be the guinea pig. They don't want to be put their neck out there first. But if someone else has done it and you have a good example, and then someone is willing to say, okay, I'll step up as well.
Actually, they've been around for quite a few years, and I know back in a number of years ago that they made some matches. So
here in Brisbane,
here in Brisbane. So it's been going on for a while.
Yeah, and we typically include it in our proposal. So I'm just taking a quick look here to see if we might have one in here.
Also, Kate, we're going to be having a race April 21st here in Brisbane, and there's going to be quite a few booths that will be in our community park. If you wanted to, set up a booth and pass out information, it's April 21st. The race starts at 8:30, and probably about 400 runners. But the community is also doing things in the park as an event day, a wellness expo thing, that's happening in town. It's the first time we've ever done a race.
Who would we contact about getting involved with that?
Probably. You can send it to me.
Russ.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Russ. Okay.
No, you can get my information probably from Sherry.
Okay.
And then we'll coordinate it.
That'd be great.
All right. Thank you.
Terry?
I really have no comments. I think it's a great idea to do home sharing, and I know a lot of that takes place off the radar, that a lot of people are doing that on their own, and it's good to see one who will help facilitate it.
Yeah, what we're most proud of is it really is a very efficient way to do it, and we do make it safe, and that it's a supportive environment, and there is no fee to anybody to use our programs at all. So it's a completely free service that we provide, because most of the folks that we deal with, quite frankly, are at that 30%. so the extremely low income.
And
What's the relationship between HIP and HEART?
So heart.
I'm glad you did.
So there's kind of a
HIP is on the HEART board.
Yeah, so there's a continuum of services in the county, right? So you have emergency services, which would be like the shelters, like Envision Shelter Network. And on this end, then you have home ownership, like first home buying programs through cities, and then Habitat for Humanity. And in the middle, you have us. We're not emergency housing, but we're permanent solution to housing. Over the top of all that, sort of overseeing what's happening in housing in this county is HEART. HEART's looking at working with all of the county players, the county, mayors and housing departments to really come up with policy that makes sense for this county, to look at it in a regional capacity as opposed to each city trying to deal with it on their own. So we have a very good relationship with HEART. We also have a very good relationship with the Housing Leadership Council. In fact, we were instrumental in that being developed about 10 years ago, or 15 years ago. So we work very closely with our other housing partners. The shelters refer to us. We refer to Habitat. In fact, one of our employees and two of our program participants last year went into Habitat housing. I mean, it's this wonderful kind of way that all the housing partners work together. But HEART is kind of the overarching. And now, with the loss of redevelopment money, they're really working on what's next. How do we find a permanent source of funding? And while HIP Housing believes that's a good endeavor and an important endeavor, we need to do something right now, and that's what Home Sharing can do.
Great. Very good.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good work. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is oral communications for items that are not on the agenda, and I see a couple, I think. I believe that Elisa Prim and Dee Dee Porter want to talk something about a street sign, electronic street sign, right?
Council. Good evening. I'm actually here. I've been meaning to come for months, actually, to talk about this, and I'm coming for a much more important matter. But since I'm here, I just wanted to bring to your attention again the electronic street sign that was placed in front of 460 San Bruno, which happens to be my house, single-family home, a few years back. I think that almost 6-year-old in the back was about a baby when I brought him to the first meeting talking about it. And it still is unsightly. I still believe that a stop sign should be put in this place rather than a street sign because it hasn't really slowed traffic down.
What intersection would that be?
It's at the corner of Alvarado and San Bruno, so right where the elementary school property begins. And at the minimum, when I had brought this up, when it was installed, they at least shut it off at nighttime. But for some reason, for the last 6 or so months, it's on 24 hours a day, as far as I can tell, on the weekends as well. So, my ask is twofold. One, that we consider, again, not having this street sign in front of single-family homes or even apartment buildings for that matter, because it's bright and it's just not, it doesn't really carry the character of this small-town community that we bought into when we purchased our home and, when other people have rented their apartments, I'm sure. And secondly, at the very least, if we could at least shut it off again at nighttime, that would be fabulous. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dee Dee?
Good evening, Council. So my name's Dee Dee Porter. I live at 449 San Bruno, which happens to be right across the street from Elisa. And our children are about the same age, and we spend a lot of time going back and forth between the houses. So I actually witness traffic patterns a lot, standing outside waiting to cross the street. And I see, the people that most of the people are really conscientious in this town. They know that there's little kids around, and will drive safely and slowly through the streets. But the people that are speeding up, and because there's a stop sign 1 block up at the school, and then 2 blocks down past
Mendocino.
Mendocino, thank you. And there are people that will drive nice and slow between them, and there are people that will barrel on through. And the electronic sign doesn't seem to be having any effect on that. So I agree that it's really unsightly, and I think a stop sign, and maybe there's a little bit too much self-interest, because then it would be easier for me to cross my street to go to Elisa's house. But I think a stop sign would be so much more effective and really get people to check themselves in the school zone.
Okay,
That's all I have to say.
thank you. Does the city manager and police chief have anything to say about that?
Maybe the city engineer wants to comment
City
on that,
engineer, yeah.
because,
Somebody,
well, let me finish. It was done with a Safe Routes to School
is
grant.
that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
and there was some attached design that went along with that. And Randy, maybe you want to comment on that if you ferret out your memory there.
Yeah, that's news to me.
Sure, that was the year we received the $200,000 Safe Route to School grant. As Mayor Pro Tem Councilmember Conway is recalling correctly on that. It actually strikes me as a little early on the agenda to talk about this, because I think this is one of those issues that really speaks to the need to have a complete streets committee, as we talked about a little bit later on the agenda. A few items come to mind, of course. Certainly, if somebody wants to have the sign come up, be turned off, you could always talk to staff. That's the phone number is in the book, 508-2130. If you wait 2 to 3 weeks for council meetings, sometimes it becomes a little difficult, because it'll take 2 to 3 weeks to get the action taken on it. So if it's been on at night, we'll get that taken care of. As far as the issue of, it's a big box, it's a sign, it's an electronic sign, and that's supposed to only be on during school hours. Its purpose is to alert people and to give people that one final chance that they are approaching a school zone where there are children, and to exercise additional caution. So I think if the council at some point in time wants to take up a conversation as to whether the inconvenience to the adjoining property owner of the public right-of-way overweighs whatever benefit it has to the public, I mean, that's certainly a conversation we're happy to participate in. And discuss with you. The recommendations about stop sign is a recommendation that we hear frequently. Unfortunately, the law-abiding members of the public will stop at stop signs, but unfortunately there's usually at least a 15% of the population, and it's been well documented in traffic studies for many years that what happens is when you have an excessive number of stop signs, what it actually causes is speed spikes, because people come to it, and even if they only do a California roll and sort of slow down, because they sense that there's too many stop signs there, they choose to accelerate their speeds to get to the next stop sign because they feel like they're being held up in traffic. And I would suggest that in a school zone, that's a really dangerous thing that we don't want to do. You don't want to have people feeling more frustrated and more stopped and constrained, and so now they're going even faster than they were before. So those are the conditions that are out there. That's what was put in a number of years ago. We do have a project coming back to replace and retrofit some of those items. That'll be coming before you in a month or two, Karen? Sounds right. So we can take a look at that with the input from the citizens and see if there's some way we can make something that's a little bit less intrusive on them and perhaps still serve the same purpose of trying to keep it as safe as we can at that major school crossing there at San Bruno and Santa Clara.
Okay, yeah, just mention, and you can, this is kind of for the mob in general, because we are reconstituting our whole, and that'll be later on the agenda, the whole advisory committee for the council on all these issues of street safety. And that committee has not been really functioning for some months now, and we're reconstituting that hopefully tonight, later on the agenda. And so we're addressing these issues, and it calls out for the first priority is protecting safe routes to schools for kids. So we hope to move on that, and then all these kinds of issues will finally get the kind, focused attention that they deserve. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, if I may.
Sure.
So Randy, so the, so that light that Elisa and Dee Dee had mentioned, so that thing's supposed to be on during school hours?
Only during school hours, only during the weeks of the year the school's actually in session.
Okay.
But obviously, its programming has gone awry, so now that we're aware of it, we'll get it corrected.
Sure. And I don't think that having it on during the school hours really affects anybody's, quality of life. I mean, it's a light, and it's during the daylight hours. No one's going to have a problem with that.
Yes, sir, and certainly it's the citizens living next to it that they may have a different opinion than I do on it, and others. I understand they're one of the lucky few that have a big green box on a pole in front of their home. So,
Well, I guess looking at it, that's the first step, is make sure that it's doing the function during the daytime, and the second step, maybe when we reconstitute this committee, is to take a look at maybe its actual functional placement. Because to me, it's down further than where a stop sign would be, and that does place it in the neighborhood versus on the corner where a stop sign would be, is what the solution is, what they're offering. And so maybe placement's an issue. So.
Yeah. And the thing about the stop sign, as the mayor had mentioned, I think that is definitely something that committee could address. It would be good to look at some analysis where you have potentially, a stop sign on every corner around a school. Does that make a difference to drivers being more aware of children and driving slower? Or, as you had mentioned, Randy, if there's the feeling that there's too many stop signs, that then there's that spike. So,
yes, sir, just as an interesting note, I think, and I think Chief Macias will concur with me, the most effective thing out there is a black and white automobile. You'd be surprised the compliance that will get, as opposed to whatever other signs we put out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to say something else? Come on up, yeah. Otherwise, they won't be able to pick you up on the television.
Thank you. And I will be happy to discuss this with the committee as well when they resume. 3 points. First, I would greatly welcome a police car. I would greatly welcome a police car on the corner. That would be perfectly fine with me. Secondly, I can see this really ugly electronic sign out my living room window where there used to be a city tree. And thirdly, at the time they put it in, and when I came to the first council meeting, they had the people that installed the sign put some tape around across the street that measured the speed of cars going by. And I happened to get home from work one day early when the man was taking the reading, and he said the average speed of cars with this sign installed and functioning, was 45 miles an hour during the hours. It varied between 35 and 45 miles an hour. So to me, that means that the sign's not really doing its job, whereas if you had to come to a complete stop, you could not be going that speed at that exact point in time, even if you did roll the stop sign. As for acceleration, I don't know really what that means, so it's definitely worth looking into.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sir, if I may, with all due respect to what Ms. Prim heard, I will bet my engineering license that the average speed on San Bruno Avenue is not 45 miles per hour. That's inconsistent with any of the studies that we've done out there with sound tubes, off by a factor of about 20 miles an hour. So she may have heard something, and maybe something was spoken incorrectly, but that's not what's going on San Bruno. That would be a death trap if cars were averaging 45 miles an hour on there right now.
Okay. So we will look into this. Then I have, I think this is an oral communication. Jamie Dunn, something about conference? Yes?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members and staff and fellow citizens. Jamie Dunn, 24-year resident of Brisbane. And I came for one thing, but now there's something else that I would just like to speak to quickly. I drive San Bruno Avenue constantly. I have never seen anybody going 45 miles an hour there because we crawl there. And any sign that's there, it really is a reminder to us, because the children are not only leaving the school at the end of school. They're leaving it from the soccer field. They're going over to play in the evening with their parents trying to go back and forth. I don't know how this light affects people who live there, but I know that 45 miles an hour is just impossible, because you stop at a stop sign, and but if you gunned it, you'd have to gun it to get to 45 miles an hour before you got to the next one. And I can't imagine how somebody would have misinformed our residents. Secondly, I like very much what Ms. Prim said, which was this small, lovely nature of our community that we all bought our houses in, and that we came here for a reason. We like it here. We like the way it is. We know we don't have any money, but in so many meetings that I go to, I keep hearing about how, oh, the Baylands is going to save us, get us all this money, etc. Well, you know, in about 45 years or 50 or 60 years or something, maybe they'll do something with it. Probably the bullet train will go through there in the meantime. But putting housing down there is not going to do anything for this town. It'll do something down there, but not something from up here, because quite frankly what it would do is this lovely town that we bought into because we like it will have major changes. As I said to somebody before, if you work for one of the firms around here, you have an hour for lunch, and you run down there where they now have a lot of businesses, and you run and you stop at a grocery store, stop at a drugstore, and you stop and get something else, and then you say, oh, well, now, why don't we go up to Brisbane for lunch? That's not going to happen. They're going to stay right there, have their lunch, and the businesses we have here are going to die. And it's just common sense, and we've all lived long enough to know that. So, at least I have. I represent a group called BOLD, not old, BOLD, and it's a group that a name that came out of a meeting of ARP some years ago that I went to in San Francisco. It was a convention, and I like that term very much. So, I've learned as I've gotten older that I've come to
Amy?
I beg your pardon?
Is it an acronym?
No, it's just, no, it is not. It's just a play on the word, because people like to use the word old and senior, and I think, you know what, take a good look. We're pretty bold, because there are a lot of us that when we retire, we could be just sitting on our duff somewhere, and we're not. And there's a reason for that, because we still care. So now, for the reason that I'm here, the reason that I wanted to speak tonight is this. First, let me thank these ladies for bringing up the nature of our town and saying how they feel about it, this small, lovely community that we bought houses in, and for the reason we bought them and why we like it. Now, I had the great opportunity of a gift from the city, and the gift was to allow me and other Park and Rec commissioners to go to the California Park and Recreation Commission, Park and Recreation Society's meetings in San Jose last week. And I went for 3 days. And it was wonderful to be with other people in the field. Years ago, I went when I was a recreation director, when I was a recreation therapist, when I ran other programs. I used to go regularly, and then I've had about a 10 years such hiatus, and it's great to go back again and get into the sense of what we are all doing and trying to preserve our parks, make them better, and make our recreation programs important and useful to the community. The Park and Recreation people have now come up with a branding. And the branding term they're using is Parks Make Life Better. That's the button. Parks make life better. The reason they didn't say recreation makes life better is it just didn't set well with the focus groups. So like all advertising, they chose the one that stuck, that parks make life better. And I'm really hoping that we, as a community, will make that part of the way we speak about our parks. Having been judged by Kaboom to be a playful city, I think we should really focus on that and really run with it. It seems to me that we don't have, and it may be just my lack of knowledge, we don't have a vision for where we want to go. Do we want 4,000 new homes? Do we not want 4,000 new homes? Do we want this kind of recreation? Do we want a library? Do we want a community center? Do we want a cultural center? What kind of community do we want? Well, I just heard from 2 women in the community who said they like the small community that we have. So instead of always looking down the road for somebody to solve our problems, working here on what we have and developing what we have, I think is a tremendous answer. And we certainly have the wisdom, the experience, et cetera, with our staff and people who've been working in the community a long time like yourselves to be able to do that. So as a member of the Park and Recreation Commission from this city, I wanted to thank you for this opportunity to have gone to this convention. It was really a wonderful sense of being with other people who have the same challenges that we all have with reference to money, have the same thoughts and ideas with references to how we want to serve the general public, and it was a great gift, and I appreciate it. So thank you very much, and Parks and Recreation make life better. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Anyone else like to address the council under oral communications? Okay. Seeing no request, I will move on the agenda, and the next item on the agenda is consent calendar. Would anybody like to remove anything?
Item A.
Item A. Okay. Any others?
Move adoption of B, C, and D.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's moved and seconded to adopt items B, C, and D. B is the monthly investment report. C is the plastic bag ban. We're doing the final reading. And the third, D, is another purchase of a very important parcel in the Brisbane Acres. And I see Fred Smith here. But I don't guess you have to say anything if we pass it on the consent calendar. All right, ready to vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we got it.
Get him off that.
He's retired. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, if Fred wants to say anything, you know, he's always welcome.
He doesn't. Good night, huh?
All right. Acted like a former council member. Got up when the getting was good.
Okay, Clark. A.
Item A, and just a small quibble on page 3, second paragraph, starts with after council member. Second sentence there should be informational presentation. And that's really all I had. Just
Okay, and while we're doing that,
I meant to call you today on that.
isn't Peterson director of the San Mateo County Environmental Health Department? Am I correct about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. While we're correcting, we might as well do that too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Actually, sir, I think his title is Director of the Environmental Health Services Division.
Okay.
Not the entire
Even better.
Yes, sir.
Might as well get it right, right? Okay. Any other changes?
Okay, with that, I'll move approval of those changes.
Minutes of March 4th.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We've done it. Okay. So now we go to old business, and that comes to the issue that Cliff was talking about before, and that is the 5K race planned for April 27th. I assume we have a staff report?
Yes.
The wrong date, too.
Is that the wrong date?
Yeah,
What's
the
what's the
21st.
correct date?
21st.
21st. Oh. Okay.
So on April 21st, there is going to be hopefully a Zippy 5K race in Brisbane. Last year, this race had 413 runners. It was held in Golden Gate Park. This year, they are asking to use the streets in Crocker Industrial Park for the race, and they are also looking to use the community park as a gathering point and then using the basketball court as a registration area. The reason they would like to use the basketball court as a registration area is it's fenced in and easy to contain everybody who's registering. The race will start at 8:30 and it should be over by 9:30 based on the results of last year's race. I think the person who ran it the slowest last year came in about 51 minutes, having looked at the times. I'm
running this year.
51 hours?
All right, I'm sorry, Steve.
I was going to respond, but I recognize my place in here. They are looking to use the park from 7 o'clock to 1 o'clock, 7 in the morning to 1 p.m., 7 o'clock for setup, 1 p.m. They anticipate all the people would be pretty much done with it. We have a Tai Chi group that uses the gazebo area in the Sunday mornings. However, that's not actually a sanctioned group of people. We don't permit them. They just show up there. So we will let them know that if you approve this use of the park for this purpose, that the gazebo would not be available that day. The city engineer developed a traffic control plan for running on the streets in Crocker Industrial Park. The traffic control plan would cost about $1,000 to implement between staff time and use of equipment. We'd also anticipate holding over a police officer, which may cost about $200 in overtime to ensure the safety of everybody who's there. There's also a traffic encroachment fee for about $1 per participant. We anticipate about 400 people, so we would anticipate the encroachment fee to be $400, and then the use fee for the park would be $138. The Excelsior Club, which is sponsoring this race, is looking to do this as a fundraiser jointly with the Mothers of Brisbane for the skateboard park. So they're asking for the city to be a co-sponsor of this race with them and waive the costs of the cost of putting up the traffic control plan, the police overtime, the traffic encroachment fee, and then the use of the park. Of those costs, the only true outlays of city funds would be for the traffic control plan and the police overtime. We do have some of the equipment for the traffic control plan, so it probably would not cost us the full $1,000. We would probably need to rent all the equipment that was needed. So what we would ask for the City Council to do would be to co-sponsor this. We have used up all of our co-sponsorship money that has been budgeted at $20,000 for a number of other items that the council has approved throughout the year. So we would anticipate, if council would like to do this, that they would do a supplemental appropriation for $1,100. So that's, I think, what would be the outside cost and the hard cost for this. For that. The other item that's being presented to you tonight is for a beer garden at the gazebo that would take place right after the Zippy 5K race. I know I have on the use permit looking from going till about 2 o'clock in the afternoon and starting at about 11, but probably a better thing to do would be to start it at 9:30 right after the race. My understanding is that there are a number of runners who, when they finish a 5K, like to have a beer. I didn't know that, but that is my understanding. So the Mothers of Brisbane would be holding a beer garden at the gazebo to do a fundraiser for the skateboard park as well. The cost for this permit would be $60 an hour, so if they're there for 5 hours, and my guess is they'll probably be there for a little bit less than that, it would be a cost of $300, and since they were asking us to co-sponsor, they're looking for a waiver of that $300. That is not normally an area of the park that we would rent, so there would be no loss of revenue from renting it from letting the Mothers of Brisbane use it. Additionally, the Excelsior Club is anticipating to be out of the park by 1 o'clock, so we're not anticipating losing any revenue from renting any of the picnic tables or grassy areas that we would normally use. My understanding is the Excelsior Club would work with us if we were able to rent any of those spots to avoid where we've rented. So we're not looking to lose any money from any of our normal rentals, and I think having this kind of an opportunity is something that the Economic Development Committee has talked about in bringing in some types of special events. I know this was an issue that was being discussed at the CPRS conference. Is how do parks make life better? One of the ways that it does that is by introducing people who are not normally come to your city by seeing what parks you have and seeing based on that, seeing other kinds of amenities such as the restaurants that we do have in town. So what we're hoping for is that this is the beginning of what could be a number of other special events that we would have in this town, using either the community park as a base or potentially the marina area as a base. Are there any questions?
I have one. The only problem area, this is on a Sunday, right? So, and it's between 8:30 and 9:30, and I brought this up before, and we looked at it, is Pitco. They seem to get a bit of traffic in the morning, and that crosses North Hill and Valley. And the race would go right in between that. And I'm not sure what time they open on Sunday. I think it might be 9 a.m.
Yeah, I did have a conversation with Mitch Bull this morning, and if the council gives approval for this to move forward, we'll go ahead and make contact with each of those businesses, probably within the next week or so, and identify any potential issues, and just, I think, good form to let them know that we're looking at doing this.
Okay, because, that's something that I know a lot of the small stores, like even in Town Market, and, a lot of the smaller liquor stores and mom and pop shops in the city go there to buy their supplies. And so a lot of times that place can get pretty active.
Right.
And so if we can maybe, kind of have them work out their schedule. And they may open up at 10. I'm not sure what time they open on Sunday morning.
We'll talk to them, and if there's any, adjustments we need to make, we'll look at that. But I think if they've got a month ahead of time notice, and the race should be in and out within an hour, so.
Right, yeah. So that's my only concern, because you get some kind of goofy business owners that have very interesting driving skills.
So any other questions? I have two members of the public who would like to speak to it. Questions before we? No? Okay. Both Dee Dee Porter and Lisa Prim would also like to speak on this issue. Which of you would like to come first?
Again. To back up, that the Mothers of Brisbane has made the proposed or hopeful new skate park our priority, and it's been looking for lots of ways to fundraise for the project. Talk more about that later this week. But and this opportunity seems like a great one, because it's all these people coming in from outside of town, and a way to, not have to go to the same pot over and over again. The beer garden would actually be co-sponsored with Best PTO, so the money would be going to our school district as well. I think that, at least from the community of people that I speak with, that schools and recreation facilities for our kids are the two priorities. So this is a potential source of fundraising for both of these key interests. So when we'd sort of laughed about this, but the idea that this is, most people are going to be finished raising at 9:30. So our proposed beer garden is not really a big drinking fest, more sort of a refreshment, and in and out. We're not imagining people to be lingering and having many beers. And sort of just to create a little bit more of a festive atmosphere, I think with this event, the idea that it could become an annual thing, I know that they talked about that, and that would be amazing. So if we can make this super duper fun and everybody has a really good time, then they'd want to come back and, bring more money and business to the city. So this idea of the beer garden, we actually thought of this about 2 years ago, proposing to do it at one of the concerts in the park to raise funds. So this seems like it would be a great opportunity to kind of test out what this would be like, and in a really limited early morning, Sunday morning sort of atmosphere, so that it's not rowdy and a raucous sort of event. And then if it goes really well, then we'd know, that potentially we could expand this as a way of fundraising for these various needs. I had one more point, and I can't remember what it was, but maybe Lisa's going to remember.
You can always come back.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Lisa's coming up, and then you can come after her. Okay?
Oh, I just had a question.
Oh, okay. Well, you want to let her ask the question?
Yeah.
Okay. So come on up.
I was just thinking, instead of calling it a beer garden, if it was a refreshment garden or whatever, and not stress it as alcohol event, but just after the race, come join us in the refreshment garden to have coffee or soda.
Okay, thank you. And would you mind giving us your name?
I'm sorry, Gail Hyde.
Get it?
30-year resident.
Yeah, we know you.
Hello again. Excellent point, well made. Yes, this would be a refreshment type of garden indeed. We would have mimosas there because they seem more appropriate for the 9:30 hour. Beer, vitamin waters, maybe bottled water, perhaps coffee. It would be an area that would be fenced off so that only of age people could enter because of the alcohol content served. But yes, I was so thrilled to find out about this race coming to our town, and just something new coming to our town, and a new pot, I think, as Dee Dee called it. And I really have very little to add. I think Stuart and Dee Dee made most of my points, and an email from Rachel Ennis that I'll read in a moment really sums it up. But basically, we're going to have 300 to 500 health-focused people in town. I don't anticipate this becoming a very rowdy event. It's going to make the park a little more festive. We're going to have food. We're going to have arts and crafts vendors, a chance to do a little bit of produce shopping. We have a gorgeous new playground. I don't know if you've noticed. So the people's, family, friends are going to be there watching them race, and hopefully are going to be hanging out afterwards. And hopefully the park will be engaging enough to get them to stay long enough. Maybe they'll go get a burrito, or hopefully they'll get something from the Lions breakfast or barbecue, whatever they can provide. So I think that really sums it up as far as what I wanted to say. I will say that being fundraising for our school district and Silver Spot, I think those are the two main things. Oh, and playground, that we are constantly getting money from the same people over and over again, canvassing for the parcel tax. It's us, and we love our community, and so we give to it. But having an opportunity, and perhaps other opportunities in the future, even if this goes well, to have outside people help fundraise for us would be really, really, really wonderful. And I will say that the two most profitable mob fundraisers, and we don't raise a ton of money, but the two most profitable ones are the Day in the Park and our semi-annual clothing swap, and those two events definitely bring outside people into town. And those are the ones that we get the money that we bring in speakers for the mob, for the mob members, and I think we had a baby sign language class that we funded with the library this year, and things like that we're able to do for the community. And so Rachel Ennis also wanted me to read something on her behalf. Hello, council members. Thank you for allowing the following comments to be entered into record for the current vote on the mob. And this is a mob and Best PTO fundraising event for the beer garden following the upcoming Zippy 5K. We, as you know, are a very small town. We have many dedicated community members who have unfailingly supported us through dinners, auctions, phone-a-thons, candy sales, and the like. Thank goodness for them all. However, what we have heard from the community over and over again is that they want new and exciting opportunities to support our groups. A well-run and small beer garden would be a welcome addition to this new event, as well as provide an opportunity to test the community support for such an offering. The mob and Best PTO have great volunteer bases who will make sure that the booth is well staffed and that no one is overserved. Please consider allowing the mob and Best PTO to offer this new and exciting fundraiser. Thank you for your time. Rachel Ennis, Best PTO Co-President, BES site. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And I have two other members of the public who would like to speak on this issue. Karen Cunningham.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I think this race would be fabulous for Brisbane. My husband and I were actually walking the route over the weekend and thinking, how fun it would be to have, a bunch of people coming to Brisbane on a regular basis, not on a one-off basis, once a year for a fundraiser of any description. Thinking that 300 to 500 people would be participating in a race of this kind, if we can manage it and not upset the local businesses, etc., and whatever else is going on is wonderful. I think there's a couple of things that are missing, however. To look at this as a Mothers of Brisbane, Best PTO only fundraiser, I think is remiss. I think if we are going to do a fundraiser of this nature, that we need to include the entire city and the businesses that reside within our city. And I am one of those businesses that reside in this city, and I am a health and wellness business, and I would like to participate. So if we are going to do that, I think we should think slightly, a little bit more out of the box. And I think the ladies have spoken about having tables. We can pay for tables. Those tables can be donated to the businesses who are, or the organizations who are fundraising for this. But moving forward, it's really a community event. It is not just a mob and a Best PTO event. This affects the entire community, and therefore, in my opinion, the entire community should be invited to participate, encouraged to participate, encouraged to spend their money on a table or whatever is necessary, and thus raise funds wherever. So, vitamin waters, etc., we can do that. The beer garden, no, I'm not so sure about that, but whatever. That's up to you. But I think there's a lot of other great businesses in town that within a very short period of time would want to participate in a health and wellness situation, and I would be one of those. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Jamie, then Dee Dee again.
Hello again. Just about a year ago or so, when I was appointed to the Park and Rec Commission, I talked to several of the commissioners, and I recommended that we do a Dipsy, because we have your wife was in that committee with me, and Mr. Lyons, and I recommended that we start looking at and bringing people into the community in such a way. We have the mountain, we can run the mountain, we can deal with Mountain Watch on how we could do that, and we should be trying to bring these groups in. So I'm happy to see that that is coming to fruition in this way, part of it. But that was one of the recommendations. This is what the Park and Recreation Commission is working on, is putting these types of activities into our community to bring people in, to bring money in, instead of us constantly going out and nickel and diming our families for participation in recreation activities. So I'm happy that somebody jumped on that because that did come from the Park and Recreation Commission at one of the meetings. I would like to see it be more extensive and be DIPSY, meaning that we use all the facility, the water that we have, the mountain, and the more extensive run, and we certainly will have many thousands of runners, in which case it would be very important to not have this be sort of the thought of as the nucleus of the big thing, which I had recommended would be a major activity that would bring money in to the whole community, not to a small group. I am concerned about that. I've heard several requests for a laying aside of a fee for this, a laying aside for a fee for that, a laying aside of a fee for the next thing. And I want to see where is the money coming in and who's paying for what they're using in our community. Quite frankly, I must say I'm very much against calling something a beer garden at 9:30 in the morning on a weekend in our community in the Central Park when we have issues with our young people and some of our older people regarding alcohol. That, to me, requires some rethinking. So, there's another thing. This is going to gore somebody's ox. Hold on. I am. But I'm holding to that term bold. When I read webpage on the Mothers of Brisbane, I don't like calling it the mob. Quite frankly, I lived in New York City and Hoboken, New Jersey, and I know what the mob is. And it doesn't really speak well to parents, quite frankly, in my mind, to be called mob. Is it meant to be hostile? Is it meant to be frightening? Is it meant to be something? Why use that moniker? But in any case, it says on that page that these are for the Mothers of Brisbane, the parents of Brisbane, and other communities. I want to know about that. Where is that money going? Is it all coming to Brisbane? If there is money, are you asking for us to waylay a fee? And some of the money of that group goes to other communities? How so? And why? So let us think carefully about any group that comes and says, you know, well, the Park and Recreation Commission is sitting and saying, all right, we're going to charge this much more per picnic table use, this much more for the lawn area, this much more for the pool, but we're not going to charge fees for this and this and this for a group that comes in that wants to raise money for their group for this. But what is that group, really? When on their webpage it says Brisbane and other locations, I think. I'm not sure the exact thing. I haven't read it in a couple of months. But it does concern me. And thank you, Mr. Lentz, for picking up on my idea of the DIPSY, because I do think that we ought to be going at a very big project to make a lot of money instead of these little small things one at a time. But if that should happen, this shall not be, I hope, taken as the beginning of that, which we're hoping will be a much bigger activity and garner much more money for the city, bring money in, and we won't be, in fact, saying you can come in and raise money for your whatever you want, and we won't charge you the fees that everybody else is paying. So there's the goring of the ox, and I shall have to deal with that in many ways, I'm sure. But I think we should I think we should keep this in mind, that this city is working very, very hard, and all the people who work here are working very hard to raise money. And we start to get this lovely feeling that, you know, certain groups, we just kind of, oh, well, this is lovely, this is nice, they're doing this for this, and this. I know all that, I understand all that, but I also know what's going on in the background with some other groups. And as a citizen, apart from anything else I do here, as a citizen, I cannot see us saying we're going to have a beer garden on a Sunday morning at 9:30 or 11 o'clock in the central of town in the park. I think we know a lot better than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Dee Dee, do you want to come back?
So I wanted to clarify that the Mothers of Brisbane is only involved, well, we're involved in two ways. We are helping provide volunteers to help staff along the race route. It's all about the traffic plan, how many people are going to be needed, but we're volunteering to help with that, and that's our only involvement in the race. And then the beer garden is one element of many that are good, or I don't know how many, we're only involved in the one, and so it's this event isn't just to benefit the Mothers of Brisbane and Best PTO. The proceeds from the beer garden would go to the Mothers of Brisbane and Best PTO, but the additional vendors that we're just discussing ways to promote it. I know I sent it out to the Mothers of Brisbane, but hopefully get it out to the community that there are lots of sponsorship opportunities to benefit whoever wants to participate in however ways, and we're not organizing that part. So we're just doing the one, the benefit for us is just the one small refreshment garden. We're happy to change the name. We haven't made up any materials, obviously, so we can call it whatever y'all want. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Any other public comment?
Could I kind of clarify something, Ray?
Sure.
You know, maybe just, Cliff, just kind of start on, or we can wait until after Alyssa, but, you know.
Want Alyssa to go first?
Yeah,
Okay.
let her go first, and that way we can have it kind of incorporated in the discussion, so maybe bring some clarity to it, because I think it's getting kind of distorted a little bit.
Thanks again. And I just wanted to comment on a previous comment about the Mothers of Brisbane website welcoming families from other communities. And that's I could see the misunderstanding of that statement. But any money we've raised of the Mothers of Brisbane has been spent here in Brisbane. We just don't exclude families from other communities in participating in our events. And they provide volunteer hours and lots of creative ideas and play dates with our children and new friends. And they do provide a lot to this community. We just don't exclude them from doing that. So, you know, money that we've raised have brought in speakers regarding raising children, have gone towards a new playground, sign language, baby sign language, like I mentioned earlier. And for this particular event, any penny that the Mothers of Brisbane is able to raise is going to go straight to the skate park, which Dee Dee mentioned earlier is our next big project. I hope that it would get done soon. Maybe it's going to take more than that to get the kind of money we need to get a concrete structure, safe structured in there, but I'd really like to see the skate park happen in the near future for kids to have a constructive outdoor place to exercise and socialize and be together, and while at the same time being at the middle of the community where people drive by all the time and are monitored indirectly. So thank you again.
Okay, thanks. Clark, you want to?
Yeah, I just kind of go back over a little bit of history of it, because, I mean, this all came about happening fast, and your reason is, you know, Cliff's a runner, and he's run this race, and they were looking for a new venue, and he had talked about Brisbane and brought it to the Economic Development Subcommittee. So things kind of happened fast, and so by all means, nobody's going to be excluded. I think it's just the outreach hasn't really been there, other than a focal outreach, and so people who've come here, just like HIP Housing, by you asking them to participate, you've asked County Health to participate, but it hasn't gone out. So I mean, to go to Karen's point, that I think anybody in the community can have a booth down there if they wish, right? It's not being an exclusive thing. So I think to address that point, so it kind of came through the committee, but it's being run through kind of fast because this is kind of upon us, you know, right now. And one of the things that the Economic Development Subcommittee had invited the Mothers of Brisbane to come and discuss maybe some ideas of what they could do for the next thing, since, you know, revamping the park, their fundraising was very successful in doing the star and the star wall. And so Alyssa Prim actually had showed up representing the Mothers of Brisbane, and we had talked about the next thing that we kind of had on the list, and this is via the Parks and Rec, was the skate park, and perhaps we can do some type of fundraising for this. So this is kind of what set all this into action, and maybe kind of fill the background into the story here that it's all coming together fast. And so, you know, they kind of picked up and said, yeah, well, you know, sure, we'll do that. And then, you know, we've had some conversation too with Alyssa about even expanding it further. And I guess this goes to your point, Jamie. A couple of years ago, I was on a ad hoc community committee, and we were looking at doing a festival, you know, that would be a community-wide festival, and it would be, you know, inclusive of all the nonprofits that. And basically, a lot of it was to do fundraising for the school. You know, there was, you know, having issues for that, and came up with names like the Mountain Festival. You know, we had to stay away from Western Days. You know, I advised them that, you know, you don't want to call it Western Days. It's just going to make people nut up. You know, some people that remember some of the bad things that happened, but it never really got off the ground. And then, you know, being in conversation with Cliff and myself, Alyssa kind of wanted to pick that ball back up too, and see where that can go, where somebody's going to be the focal point to maybe want to help something like that happen. And so in the Economic Development Subcommittee, we're also in conversation with this group. It's a nonprofit group. It's called Running Waters, which they actually put on events, and I think Cliff is the one that made the contact with the person. Now staff's in contact with them, and this is all going to be part of our economic development plan. It'll be coming around early spring, like in May time or whatever, but by this time the race will be over. So just kind of fill in a little bit of background. This is kind of how all this came about. So, and hopefully that helps. I don't know. Kind of just quick synopsis. Is there anything to add to it, Cliff?
No, you pretty much said, you know, most of it, Clark.
Yeah.
You know, and Stuart says some stuff, and Jamie, of course, Dee Dee and Elisa. I mean, this really is, you know, trying to showcase Brisbane, and this is like a first step for us. You know, having a race that's already established, having folks that have run this race 13 or 14 years is invaluable. And then, of course, then partnering with all the different groups in town, you know, to make it that much more of an event. You know, I'm really excited. I'm really excited about it. You know, I was at the Emerald Nuts Across the Bay race on yesterday. and they had a big expo after the race down at Aquatic Park, and a lot of the booths that are there, they charge. The race organizer charges and they pay, and but this is the first time we're doing it in Brisbane, and we want to make sure that we establish ourselves as a race to go to, an event to go to. And so sometimes you charge free admission. You let them come in and set up their booths and partake in the event. And then once you get established, then you can say, well, you know what, we're going to charge you $100 or something like that, or whatever, or provide something to the event. One of the things that we had talked about the last time was parking, and that was an issue. And so I reached out to Helena Court, and she's going to let us use 2 of her sites for parking. Larry Purcell said, yeah, no problem, we can use his parking lot. KTSF, they said we could use part of their parking lot. So, and that's huge for races. I've been running races for years, and very few races have designated parking. And here we'll have quite a bit of designated parking, which...
So there are 2 races. The actual race and the race to get parking.
A lot of runners, they carpool. And so, at the website, there will be the sites where you can, the parking locations will be designated, and we'll be working with the mob. Part of the way that they get their money, and usually with a race, there is one beneficiary. Sometimes there's multiple ones, but usually there's one. And our race is small compared to many races, and so we can only give so much. And if you spread it too thin, I mean, the volunteers aren't going to really participate the way that they would if they're getting a large chunk. And so, I had reached out to the mob because I know that they've been wanting to put some money towards the skate park. And since the race starts near the skate park, and it just seemed like, okay, this looks like some good synergy here. It looks like a good fit. And it was, like you talked about, Clark, we had in our economic development subcommittee looking at ways to promote the city. So so I think what staff has proposed is. I hope that we can agree to it and approve it and have a great time.
Okay, thanks. Terry?
So the last time when this was first proposed, when we first discussed the possibility if we would entertain the idea, you had said that San Francisco was where this race had previously been held, and that the cost there had gotten more than what was, and so your race organizers were looking for a different location. So is this usual, or that Brisbane's willing to waive their hard costs? And I'm not talking about the any fees that are revenue generating, but the hard cost, based on the assumption that is part of the registration fee going to as a donation? Is that what the anticipation is? Is that do they have an idea of what they expect on financial?
Yeah, so the reason why the club decided to choose Brisbane is really because of me. I'm a member of the team. And this race is supposed to be our big fundraiser.
For your club.
For our club, right? And so we're a nonprofit as well. So the race was being held in San Francisco, and the costs were going up. And I said, well, maybe Brisbane might be a good location. And this is something that we had talked about in our economic development subcommittee. And so. About bringing events to Brisbane. I know that there are some costs here for the traffic, from this traffic analysis that Randy has proposed. And I'm not an expert in traffic safety and coordinating these things, though there are cheaper ways to do it. But since this is the first time that we're doing this race in Brisbane, perhaps doing these things is appropriate. I mean, in all the races that I've run, most of them just use cones and volunteers, and so that's so the costs are greatly reduced. The co-sponsorship thing, I think because the money is going towards, or some of the part of the money is going towards the skateboard park, that's something that we own and provide as a benefit to the community. And here we're trying to support that endeavor, plus trying to help our other, helping our businesses in town. I think, that is something that is consistent with what we've done with other groups as well.
Normally, our co-sponsorship is for local groups, and I understand that you're trying to showcase Brisbane and bring in some new blood and new donation opportunities to Brisbane, and I don't have a problem with that. And I know it's a fundraiser for your club, but have they made a commitment to the local people who are going to be helping with your traffic and making it a fun event? Have they made any commitments to them as far as co-fundraising ship at all? Or is it?
Well, so part of the partnership that you have with the beneficiary is that they help with certain aspects of the race, and perhaps at the registration table or when they're passing out the goodies at the end of the race, also with manning certain parts of the course with flags and things like that. But of course, our club members would also help coordinate that as well. So and then some of the hard costs, the team has some cones, though it was hoping to use the city's
I'm more trying to get the idea of Mothers of Brisbane, on behalf of Mothers of Brisbane and Best PTO, is willing to help and possibly be one of the beneficiaries of this event.
The mob, we chose the mob. The money doesn't necessarily have to go to the mob. It could go to the city to go towards the skate park if that was the case. But usually, since the mob is spearheading this event or spearheading the effort, it just seemed appropriate to give the money to them, and then they would in turn give it to the city to do.
My question is, so they have an anticipation of getting some of the proceeds from the race, not just their refreshment stands.
That is correct.
Okay, that was what I was trying to get at. They're a beneficiary of the event, whereas they have an expectation of raising some funds from this event.
Yes.
And that's the agreement that would be worked out
yes.
between your club and their organization.
That is correct. Last year, the Lowell cross-country team was the beneficiary, and because of costs from the city of San Francisco and other costs, the club broke even on the race, but they still gave the cross-country team $500 because they felt they needed to do that. And we, typically you give 50% of your proceeds to the beneficiary, up to $1,000. That's what we have told the mob.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we have Dee Dee, and both Dee Dee and Jamie want to weigh in. Dee Dee? Okay.
I can. I can't speak for our best PTO, but I feel pretty confident speaking for the Mothers of Brisbane that if the donated, the money raised could go to the city as long as it was earmarked for the skate park, but that's what we're raising for very specifically, not for, any of our other programs. So we'd be happy to do that if that helps. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Jamie?
Thank you. Thank you, Dee Dee. That's a very important thing, that money that's being raised in Brisbane for a Brisbane project should be given to the City of Brisbane. And the City of Brisbane then applies it to the project as opposed to other groups that may be working on a project in the city. That was a major concern of mine. And I'm just wondering, how is money being made? The runners are not being charged a fee. I've never seen a race that a runner isn't charged a fee to participate in. And the reason I bring this up is in the field of recreation, there's a theory, and that's a proven theory, and studies have been done on it, that if you charge nothing, it's worth nothing. And people who study recreation will tell you this, that it's very important to put a charge on whatever program you have. It doesn't have to be a very high charge, it has to be a charge. There is a value that somebody is receiving, and they are going to pay something for it. And if you want to subsidize that by making that fee low, then that's fine. But if you charge nothing, the human mind, according to these studies, indicates, well, it's not worth anything. So that, and I really do appreciate Dee Dee saying that this money, she sees that going to the city, because I think that's the appropriate conduit for money that's going to be spent on a city project, is that it goes through the city. One other thing, twice tonight I heard the bringing up this sign language class for the infants. If my memory is correct, and I can easily be corrected, most likely Mr. Schillinger will remember, I think that class was canceled because there weren't enough people interested in it. But it got brought up as example to you as a lovely class, and this is what we're doing. Quite frankly, it's a non-existent class, and it didn't make it. There was no interest for it. So yes, we have brilliant ideas to try and do things, and then we want to showcase them in some way, but it doesn't exist. So I didn't think I could let that go. But anyway, thank you. I'm sure that there will be some way that the city will notify all businesses, maybe through the Chamber of Commerce, maybe through the web, whatever way, all businesses that may want to participate now that we know that booths are going to be set up. But I'm trying to understand, how is money going to be made? We know how money is going to be spent. We have to pay for an extra hours for the police department. We have to pay, how is money going to be made? Is it through the different booths? Well, then each of those booths can take in any amount of money they want, and then what percentage are they supposed to donate? Is it all of what they take in, or 5% of what they take in? Usually a race makes money by the entrance. The people who run pay a fee, and that's how you make money. There's a race in upstate New York, very small city. It's called the Boilermakers. You might want to look it up. Very interesting. They started this in a sort of a nondescript city because I was born there, And I know a lot about that city, and they call it the Boilermakers. It starts out right near the Utica Club Brewery, because Utica Club Brewery actually started this race. And this year, they actually had to close registration within 3 days because they could only take the 14,000 people that registered. You imagine 14,000 people coming in here and running. There'd be a major effort for our city to manage, but we could do it, and it would make a lot of money, and we wouldn't be nickel and diming these. If we have 400 runners at $10 a piece, that's $4,000, and $4,000 would be really nice to be put into the coffers for the city. So I don't understand why they're not being charged to run, and I don't know where the money's coming from that you're going to donate. The Mothers of Brisbane and your club are partnering together to make money for the city, but where's the money coming from?
So let us ask Cliff Lentz that question.
Please.
Yes, thank you.
You're the expert on that.
Sure. No, the people are paying to be in the race.
There's a fee to be an entrant.
Absolutely, there's a fee to participate in the race. So that's how the money is being raised. I mean, there's other costs that are associated with the race. You know, the race is sanctioned by USA Track and Field.
I understand.
So that ensures a nice chunk of people that automatically come to the race. There's only, I think there's only 10 races in the Bay Area that are certified through USA Track and Field that are part of the Pacific Association circuit. This would be one of those races. But by being a part of that, the prize money is quite extensive. So we'll get some pretty fast runners.
Very good. That's wonderful.
Yes, yes.
But
So,
the money coming from these booths, everybody who's participating, how does that money get donated?
Okay. Well, I mean, are we gonna have a conversation with us, or am I having a conversation with?
You seem to know the answers to the money thing.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Since you've been through this before, right?
Yes. Okay. So there are the race fees, and
which are.
I think it's $30. $30 early bird, and I think it goes up after that. Part of the money, you know, for part of your entry fee goes to your T-shirt as well. As far as you know, the booths, again, we're gonna have the booths be free to everyone who participates this year, because we want to make it an event. We want to bring in folks from all over. I mean, I've been hesitant about, you know, really formally bringing people to the race because we haven't formally approved it. You know, I mean, I've said, hey, you know, we're doing this race, but I haven't sent out the letter, you know, because I'm waiting for the council to hopefully approve it. At the race yesterday, I went to several booths where, you know, one was Naked Juice, the other one was Power Bar, and you know, and Naked Juice is interested in coming to the race. Power Bar said, you know what, you need to let us know 8 months in advance so we can schedule it. So I mean, in some ways, we're really behind. I'm not sure how many folks, you know, will get to the race, but you know, whatever we get is fine. And you know, it's really just to have a great event in town and learn from it, and so that we can potentially do other things in the future. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess probably to address Jamie's thing is, if other people put up booths, they wouldn't be required to donate. This is really kind of something that the Mothers of Brisbane is kind of worked out as a nonprofit. Other booths, I mean, like if Karen put up a booth, she's not a nonprofit, but the booth would be whatever she wanted to put up, a table or something like that. But right now, there's no really.
So in here, what's before you is the permit from 7 to 1 o'clock. and so the park is reserved. And so we're allowing folks to come and set up their table during this time. And in some ways, I guess it's being kind of run through the race committee, and not through the city. The beer garden is a separate issue that the mob and the best PTO have asked before the city. So, yeah. So I mean, if the running club was making money, I think off of the sponsor, from the sponsors, that money would have to, I think, go
be shared.
Exactly, right. And so this is new for the club being in Brisbane. We're hoping that we get the amount of people that we've had in the past, but we don't know. But by having the co-sponsorship, having the volunteers, we think that this could be good for the club and also good for the city, and we look at it, on a year-by-year basis.
I think it just came in a rapid succession is what it is. This is happening so fast, that, you can't cover all those bases just yet, it seems, because there's a lot of good questions,
Right. Karen, you wanted to? Sure, please.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, I do a lot of these kind of events. With the establishments, yes, the cost of having a table is more substantial because, you're guaranteed of having 200 people walk by your table on a regular basis. With the newer events, typically they are either no charge or very little charge. My thought would be that, local businesses would probably want to participate to cover the hard costs, so, the city's not out of any money for a test event. And personally, I would assume this could bring a lot of really nice attention to the city, as long as we are very careful to include the local businesses that want to have a table to do something for this first event. However you deem to charge it. I mean, I'm not sure what the hard costs would be, but if we've got 20 tables, I'll put up 1/20th of the cost, so the city's actually not going to be out of pocket for this. And I think you'd get a lot of the businesses that would be, really, really interested in participating in this event.
Yeah, as far as reaching out to the community, I did send an email to Mitch this morning, letting him know that we were going to be discussing this tonight, and he's been bugging me. He said, "Cliff, I'm send me something. I said, "Well, I can't, but I sent him something this morning and said we were going to discuss it tonight, and so and in the letter, I said, we would love to have local businesses participate. If they would like to pass something out to put in the goodie bags, that's even better. And then if they want to financially kick in some money, that's the best. But we're not pushing that for this event right now. As Clark said, I mean, it's almost here. It's moving really fast. We just would like to have a good event and get folks excited about it, and hopefully continue to do more stuff like that.
I would like to offer a couple of opinions, if I may. I think the idea of the race is a positive one, and bring people to town, and it seems worthy of a trial, and see how it goes, and try to see if we can generate some other kind of local business interest. I think that's great too. So I'd be in favor of that. And since it is a trial, experimental thing, we're not really quite sure how it's going to work. I think it is appropriate as a trial to waive the fee for the first time around. for the extra police service and so forth. $1,100, I think Stuart mentioned. I would go for that. Where I have a problem, and Jamie mentioned it as well, is with the sale of beer and the city be involved in that in any way. I had this historical problem that we had something called Western Days, and we had open sale of beer on the streets. And what did it do? It brought all the motorcycle gangs in the whole Bay Area to Brisbane, and what did we have the whole afternoon? Gang fights. And it was all because of beer. And so, I have that very vivid memory, and I'm sure the police chief has that memory too. We had to bring in cops from all over the county to deal with it. We might be able to get away with it for the first time, especially if we call it a refreshment garden, which I thought was a clever idea. But if you call it a beer garden and some motorcycle guy, emails it or Twitter or what have you, first thing you know, you got 500 motorcycle people in town. I mean, in the Western days, it took a year or two for it to build. But now, when they pull people together, with the electronic media, you have no idea what's going to happen. It's a really big risk in my mind. And so it really makes me nervous. I don't know whether the police chief gets nervous or not, but it makes me nervous because I remember all the street fights, and it was just terrible for Brisbane. So what seems like a nice idea may not turn out to be. So it may be we could get away with it the first time, especially if we don't call it a beer garden. But I'm really worried about setting a precedent because the history is such that it just doesn't turn out well. There are just a lot of people who like to drink beer in public, and they drink too much, and they get in fights, and then we got big problems. So that part of it makes me very nervous because of the history. I know you wanted to say it's not going to be raucous and so forth, but you really can't control that. If the motorcycle gangs decide to come, they're here. And I don't know what we could do about it. Beg your pardon? Yeah. So anyway, that worries me a lot based on past history. So I'm nervous about that part of it. Maybe we could hide it with a refreshment garden, and so nobody knows that there actually, there's beer available as a part of other refreshments. And but I think we need to be really careful about that part of it because of the past history. It just hasn't worked. And there were the groups who were selling the beer, it was the firefighters and the Lions, and they were great groups, right? Fundraiser. But that didn't stop the motorcycle gangs from coming and doing their thing. So that's what worries me about that part of it. The rest of it is fine for me. That part, based on historical experience, I'm really nervous about. Understood? Does that make sense?
Well, if I could, Ray,
and of course you were there too, Clark.
Certainly, I know, and 35 years ago, it was definitely a different time. People's attitudes. Granted, alcohol does do funny things to people, at times, but. I would actually like to hear from the chief of police on that matter.
Yes. Excuse me. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I know that for me, it's really important. I know that to support our community groups, and I know that the Mothers of Brisbane and Best PTO, they do wonderful things too for our community and for our children. So I did have some reservations as well about this particular beer garden or refreshment garden. But I did also realize that ABC does have some very strict mandates about the sale of alcohol. So in this particular beer garden sale, the applicant, which would be the Mothers of Brisbane, would be responsible, Best PTO Mothers of Brisbane, would be responsible to have a designated area marked off for where the consumption of alcohol would be allowed. And they're also responsible to monitor and maintain that area to make sure that people don't leave that area with beer. So they are controlled within an area. And then the other thing that I had some reservations about, obviously, were addressed was the drinking on an empty stomach. And so I was happy to hear that the Lions Club was going to be providing some type of food. But ABC does require and is very strict about the mandate that they require when they obtain that ABC license. So I think, a relief for the community as well as for myself and our department that, they will be monitoring that area. So they just can't have people walking around the park drinking beer or leaving this area drinking beer. They'll have to stay within this designated area. They also are responsible to make sure that they don't provide alcohol to somebody after they feel that they're intoxicated. They have a right to say, no, we're not going to serve you anymore. They also must ask for identification for everyone and be consistent with that to make sure that they don't assume liability of serving to minors. So there's a lot of responsibility placed on the actual applicant.
And if I may, through the mayor, I have a question for the chief. So Lisa, for the spring thing, they also serve alcohol at that event. Have there been any issues with disorderly conduct from participants at those events?
We have not encountered any. And again, they do a good job of making sure that they are controlling the environment, and as well as they have a shuttle that provides service to the residents so that to avoid people from getting in their vehicles and drinking and driving.
Okay, thank
you. I would just say that those events are, not, in my mind, not comparable because they're in enclosed structures, much easier to control. When you have something in the open, on the street or in the park, to be able to do all that monitoring, I mean, it's nice to have the rules, but the Mothers of Brisbane are going to stand up to a motorcycle gang? No way. So if they're willing to take that on and take the risk, I mean, they should know what they're getting into, because it may or may not happen. I may be just fantasizing and it won't happen and everything's fine and people just sip a little beer and everybody's happy, But the history is not that case, at least in my experience. I remember we did all these nice things, all the same nice arguments, all the same nice rules, and so what do we have? Motorcycle gangs fighting on the street. So all those things are true. It's just a question of how it evolves, and those things are really, to a certain extent, uncontrollable. And so taking on that responsibility, it may be easy and may not be a problem. But I just wanted to raise the point that we better be aware of the fact, if history is any guide, there's at least a probability that this could occur. And then you need to be prepared for it. And then we got a lot of police costs, and that's why we have to be very careful about how this is done if we're going to go ahead with it. Does the police chief agree with that, or?
Yes, I mean that's a possibility, and anything can happen. That is correct. I think in this particular event, it's targeting those that are attending the run and attending the health fair or the fair at the park after the event. But yes, anything is possible. I guess at that time the Mothers of Brisbane or Best PTO would have to make a decision whether to shut it down. So they do have those options should it get out of, or should there be a huge number that they feel that they can't control. Then at that point I don't see any reason why they can't just shut it down and say we're done.
Okay. Jamie?
Quoting Rodney King, why can't we just all get along? Everybody wants to be nice. We don't want to seem like the person who puts the kibosh on somebody else's happy time or happy idea or something. We all want to look like the good guy. But we're going to have to take responsibility. I'd have these kinds of questions. What happens if there's a major event or a minor event and somebody gets sued, and how does that affect the city? I heard Ms. Porter say several times, it's not Best PTO and the Mothers of Brisbane, it's Best PTO that's getting the license only. How are they? I mean, we're busting our butts to make sure our school's doing okay, and how would they do if they got sued for something like this? And no, it would be foolish for us to think that this couldn't happen, that we couldn't have this place overrun with people coming in and being part of a big outdoor hullabaloo. Today, in our town, you probably all know this, fire department was called because there was an alcohol-fueled brawl on the street. And it was just a couple of guys. It was not a big deal. But the fire department, imagine the cost of dragging out the fire department. They're here because we've got guys fighting over with beer or alcohol, whatever it was that fueled them, and they're not someplace else. So we may want to be the good guy. Gosh, I would love to have on my epitaph, what a good, nice person. Boy, she was sweet. That would be lovely. But I would be the most dishonest person. They'd have to put in parentheses, but so dishonest. Because I can't, I would trip over my tongue all the way home if I didn't tell the truth. These are things that are critical issues. We really have to look at them. For you, Mr. Lentz, this is really hard because you're trying to get this going and you've got a date and you're trying to manage it all. So I can't imagine what that's, I can't imagine. I've been through things somewhere. That's why I feel misery with you. As a citizen, I'm looking at the fact that this thing can blow up if we're looking at from a lot of different perspectives, getting a gang of people that we can reach them so quickly by social media. And we don't have to be the one to reach them. Somebody else can say, well, they're going to throw this party and there's going to have a beer garden. Thank goodness we're now considering, and Dee was saying, you know, a refreshment garden, that'd be fine. You know, that certainly would tone it down. And if it doesn't get out, that's what we're doing, we're probably better off. But quite frankly, if I recall, the Brisbane Inn, Julie's, the club, all three, if not more, have been cited recently for serving alcohol to minors by a county group. It wasn't the Brisbane Police, it was county group. I can't remember the moniker for them, but all three were cited. This was in the last month or so. Now, when you're trying to run an organization, you've got people coming all over the place, you've got your kids, you've got people with all their booths, everything's going on, and you're trying to look at somebody's license. You're trying to look at that person and say, do they look over 21 or they don't look over 21? This is a really serious thing. And having an enclosed venue where you have a door, you know, where somebody comes through and you can check them and you have people that are, you know, more than one, as opposed to a wide open area, just from a programming aspect, this is a critical issue. So, okay, it's not going to say on my headstone, if I have one, but a nice person. No, it's probably going to say, and I hope it does, gosh, she told the truth, nobody did like it very much, but these are the things that I am very, very concerned about. And so it's best for us to talk about them because we can probably fix them as best we can before they happen, rather than just trying to be nice, easygoing people that say, oh, that's great, let's do it fun. I think it's a wonderful thing. I'm glad we're doing it. Like I said before, if Park and Rec Commission pushes, which we've been trying to do, is find these big activity type things that we can make a lot of money at one time rather than nickel and diming. If we do ever get a Dipsy or a Mountain Run or something like that, this is a different issue, because that will be definitely money that will go into the programming for the city to make the decisions what to do with. So that was a concern of mine. But I think the mayor's concerns, although put in a very kind and lovely way, and should be very well taken, and we should listen very carefully to them, and we should start working right now if we want to do this. And I would love to see it happen, but I think that all these things have to be taken care of. We can't monitor a lot of people. 400 people, let's say they're just the runners. Then we've got people from town. That's a lot of people milling around, and we've got kids milling around, and we don't know who else will come into town or what other events might be going on at some of the local venues that might bring people into town. We don't know what's going to happen, so a lot of planning has to happen quickly. And all of these things, which may at this point seem to be negative issues and negative points that kind of pick at you, Mr. Lentz, because you've got a big burden right now of trying to get this race up and going. They really may save our butts, literally, at a later date. We don't want Best sued. We don't want to be sued. We don't want anybody hurt. We don't want the fire department or police department down there breaking up fights. And yeah, they can happen anyway. You know, we might have that happen anyway. It has happened on the street today. So I think there are a lot of things to be done. I certainly hope you get the support that is required, but I hope all these questions do get answered in whatever way. And if you want to volunteer to help in any way, maybe I can help. I don't know what you'd need me for, but I'm willing to look at all these things, because in programming I've done in my lifetime, I've had to make sure that we didn't make those mistakes.
Okay.
So good luck.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Can
Jerry?
Yes, thank you. Personally, I don't think that people coming in for a run are going to be the beer brawling kind of people that come to this event. Most people that are going to come for the would come to an event for drinking, come in the late afternoon or the evening. They aren't, you know, and most runners are probably not usually 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. beer drinkers. I would like to see in the future a wine event, you know, those kind of things. I don't want to exclude alcohol from an event because 30 years ago there were motorcycle gangs that came to town. That was 30 years ago, and I think we've learned from some of those mistakes as far as letting it be a free-for-all. And I think if you have an event where you're catering to a certain kind of person, you're mostly going to get those kind of people. A problem can happen anytime, whether there's alcohol involved or not, because there's always unknowns to having a public event. But personally, while a lot of the concerns raised have been good concerns, I think a refreshment stand that also serves alcohol, that is controlled, that has people watching it, and that the police don't see a problem with, I think that we could handle and readdress later if there was a problem and if it created concern. For me, it really doesn't.
You know, we talked about Best. PTO is actually going to be applying for the permit because have done this with their annual fundraiser, right? Albeit in a building, but they have controlled it well. You know, this year, I don't think they're going to have a building, and I believe
they found one.
Did they?
They did.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's the word around town.
Okay.
Found the building.
They did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, but I'm willing to take the risk to see how this works. You know, I think this is something new, and I don't want to put the kibosh on it right away. I agree. Calling it a refreshment garden is probably more appropriate than a beer garden, and that you serve the mimosas or whatever, you know, whatever you're going to do. But I'd like to see just how it functions, because, you know, I think in the future we probably will, you know, have more things if we have more community events. You know, people like to have the alcohol, like what Terry's saying about having a wine festival. A lot of communities up and down the peninsula have it, and you know, I just don't. I see motorcycle gangs nowadays are different than they were 35 years ago. They're still criminal, but they're not as loud. And they do the poker runs as fundraisers, and they actually come to Brisbane at times. But the chief, you know, I don't know of any problem that we've actually had. There's, you know, always had your police force out there, and you know, bring in other police services also from out there, and they've always been pretty well schooled, and it was like in and out, and it's just not like the the raucous crowds that was, back then. Back then, I recall the reason there was drinking on the streets and everything like that, it was allowed. I mean, I think the city itself sponsored the beer drinking contest, as I recall. Right there in front of where their liquor store is now, and people are lining up and, and how much can they chug, and it's like, so, I mean, it is different. It's a different time, albeit you need to be concerned, certainly, but I wouldn't want to put the kibosh on this event for that segment of it because of what happened then, and I'd like to see how we're able to function. I mean, after all, it is from 9:30 to 1, and taking Terry's point is those raucous people are recovering from the night before. Get ready for Saturday night or Monday. I don't know. I mean,
I know that the big famous race that they have, the Beta Breakers, I'm sure, people doing that race, there's the serious runners, and then there's the people who dress in costumes and come for the party. Yeah. And I think that if we ever got to where we had 300,000 people running, we would have a concern with it being that popular. And we would have concerns about policing it and controlling it. But I think that at this point, this race, because it has been left fairly late to the final stages of planning, we would be happy to see we had a crowd at the community park. We may have no one at the community park. And that's why the group can't say that it's going to meet expenses. It can't say if it's going to be profitable for them or their sponsor partners. And so I think it's a learning curve, but I don't think we should prejudge it until we can see what they're able to do. And next year, if this one goes off and it's successful for the club and successful for Brisbane, it can be a different event because it can be a planned event. It can be a continuing event. And you always have a better sponsorship and better attendance if you've got a continuing event. The first year, things can be very lackluster. And then as support builds, you can get a better event. I've seen bicycle races that we've been notified of, and by the time I'm awake on a Sunday morning and have driven into town, I mean, there's nothing left except they're taking down the street sign saying that the street had been closed for an hour. It's like, I would bet that 90% of the people in town didn't even know that that bike race happened and that we issued a closure for street use. So I would hope that people in the community know and get out and that it's a successful afters party. But, I wouldn't have the concerns of a raucous, beer-swilling, gang-fighting party in the streets.
Ray, to address your concern, what type of, Lisa, what type of security around the gazebo were you thinking of to maintain everybody staying within that footprint?
I think just as long as you have an area maybe taped off so that people are aware and you have some of the best PTO or the volunteers just outside of that area, just making sure that people just don't, if you have an area taped off, is generally what I've seen in the past. And chairs and tables there so people can go and sit and, have their beer or any other food that they may be, eating.
So like maybe putting some yellow tape around the cement perimeter and then having like one in and out so that you get your ID checked when you go in, and then when you're in that space, everyone's of age, and then...
Because the idea is to keep that area of consumption at one location to avoid minors going in there, people that aren't of age. so that there isn't no liability of them consuming some alcohol. So I'm not really sure how that setup is going to be there at the gazebo for the actual setup itself. But yes, having one way to go in where once they purchase, have a way to go in, and then they'd come out.
Mm-hmm. All right. And do you think that have you provided the safety tape to volunteer groups or nonprofits in the past to use for events?
We have not, but we sure could. I mean, that's not a problem.
Okay. All right. Thanks. How does that sound, Ray? Having that more secure site.
Yeah. Well. And it's back to, the possibility, not the probability.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not saying this is inevitable, of course not. But based on past history, we know it's possible. And maybe they'll behave differently, Clark, but there's still motorcycle gangs who wander around and cause ruckus in various places, and that's still a reality. And so consequently, I think we need to do all the safeguards that we can to be careful about that. SBTO is clearly, taken on the responsibility, and I assume they understand that the liability that's involved there if something does happen. It may not. The probability is that nothing will happen. I mean, I understand that, but since there's the possibility, a responsible decision-making process looks into the possibilities and tries to guard against them. That's how I'm kind of thinking about it. And the best BTO, I assume, I don't think you can even get a permit to sell liquor unless you have liability insurance. I believe that's the case. Am I right about that? Staff members?
Yeah, we would require insurance for having liquor being there. As well as we're going to require the Excelsior Running Club to have insurance for running on our streets.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they have to recognize that they take on that responsibility, they're taking on that liability, and the only way to reasonably deal with that is to have insurance. Because neither one of them wants to have any kind of cost out of pocket for things like that outside of the insurance itself. Mm-hmm. As I said earlier, that I think the idea of the event is a good one, and I think we should give it a whirl, and I'd be prepared to support a motion that does do some co-sponsorship and sharing the cost that Stuart identified as kind of an economic development effort, which Clark and Cliff are talking about. I mean, I have no problem with that part of it at all. The second part, I really think we ought to be careful about, and call it a refreshment garden and take all the safeguards that we've been discussing and make sure that we do the best we can to avoid a problem. And it could very well be that everything will work out just wonderfully and no problem. But you need to worry about those things because they do happen on occasion. And so that's why you have insurance, and that's why you have police and so forth. Because every now and then people go beyond the appropriate behavior, and then you have to do something about it. So that's kind of my view. Now, I would like to ask the staff to, because there are a couple of things we've talked about, and there are some I think we probably need to clarify in the motion to make clear what our decision is, and Stuart is usually great at drafting a motion that gets all the things that we need to decide and be clear about what we're saying.
Okay, so my understanding of this is that the City Council is willing to waive the cost for the traffic encroachment fee of about $400, the $1 per person, since that's not a hard cost for the city per se. That it is willing to waive the fee for the park use, because it's not another not hard cost for the city. That it is willing to have a not to exceed for overtime and any rentals of any equipment or anything like that that we would need of $1,100 for the Excelsior Club, that it would also be willing to waive the fee that would normally be charged to the Mothers of Brisbane for at $60 an hour for about 5 hours, or $300, because again, that's not a hard cost.
It's Mothers Brisbane
and Best PTO,
right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
My further understanding is that the City Council would like staff to work with the Excelsior Running Club to provide information to the businesses within the community about this event, as well as working with the Best PTO Mothers of Brisbane on developing the refreshment center standards. That was my understanding listening to the conversation.
How's that sound, Cliff?
That's exactly what I was thinking. So
you want to make the
moved.
motion? Sure thing.
Or would
You know, I'd rather have.
I just did.
See ya? Let somebody else to make it?
I will second that
Okay.
motion.
So Clark made the motion and Terry seconded it. Any further discussion?
Call the question.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Long discussion, but I think we're much clearer now on what needs to be done, and this is setting a precedent, and if it works, it'll be great for the future. So I think we should, thank Cliff for all the tremendous amount of work that he's done on this, and we're hoping that it all comes off in the way that you envisage it. But you're sure doing your darndest to make sure that it does, I know. And we appreciate that.
Thank you.
He wants to win the race.
Besides, you won't even have to fight over a parking space. Yeah.
You know, I probably will run. Probably. But I haven't,
15 minutes after your busy schedule during that day to run that
I
5K?
wish it was 15. If I could do it under 17, I'd be happy.
Oh, okay.
So we'll see.
So, may I suggest we have a 5-minute break?
I think that's a good idea.
How far is 5K?
3.1 miles.
3.1 miles?
You can do it under 7 minutes?
17.
17.
Huh?
17 minutes.
Oh, 17.
Yeah, Clark, I'll be with you in the 51 minutes.
no, I was kidding about 51 minutes to be fast for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That 51 is probably...
Thank you, sir.
Trained right.